Welcome to my channel. First of all, don't get too excited. I am not going to be doing cooking videos on my channel probably ever again. I can't cook. I only cook well enough that I don't starve and I don't spend too much time in the kitchen. But since I picked those apples last week, I thought I would show you what I did with them. A couple of them I just ate. A couple of them went bad. Sorry, apples. And the rest I made into 2 recipes. So the first recipe was for apple butter, which was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. I have a link to the original recipe in the description box below, but I made a couple of changes to it. You start out by washing the apples and then cutting them into chunks. Now, one of the reasons I like this recipe is you don't have to peel the apples first. You can tell I am a little awkward at cutting these apples, but you'll be happy to know that by the time I was done, all 10 fingers were intact. I didn't cut myself once, and a couple of times I felt like I was ready for the next Food Network star. Once the apples are cut, you add together a 1/4 teaspoon salt, 1½ teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon of ground cloves. Now this is one of the places where I deviated from the recipe. The recipe calls for a 1/4 cup of pure maple syrup. But pure maple syrup is kind of expensive and brown sugar is not. So I substituted a 1/4 cup of brown sugar and then 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. You mix it all together, and this is the other place where I deviated from the recipe. She cooks it on the stove for a couple of hours, stirring occasionally. I am not going to stand by a stove for a couple of hours, so I put it in my crock pot and cooked it on low overnight. So the apples are cooking and I'm sleeping. Works perfectly. The next morning, you can see I'm still in my bathrobe. My mother made that bathrobe for me. Anyway, you put the apples in the blender and you puree them until they're smooth. Then you put them back in the crock pot and cook them until it's the consistency that you want or you get bored. I made some toast to put it on. Now you notice my toast is burnt. When I was a little kid, money was tight, and one day my mother accidentally burnt the toast and she was going to throw it out. We really couldn't afford to throw food out, so I said, I'll eat it. I like burnt toast. So I ate the burnt toast, no problem, right? My mother, who loves me very much, made me burnt toast every day after that. Words have consequences. So anyway, that's the only way I can eat toast anymore. If it's not burnt, I'm like, I don't want this. The apple butter on the toast is really good. Now, if I had been thinking ahead of time, I could have bought some canning jars and canned some of this apple butter to save it for the future or to give it as Christmas gifts. But no one's ever accused me of being smart. So I put it all in this container. It's in the refrigerator, and I will be having a lot of burnt toast in the next few weeks. It took me a few days later to figure out what else I wanted to do with the remaining apples. We are coming up on fat season, and I don't want to add to what I know I'm already going to gain over Thanksgiving and Christmas. So I decided what I would make is an apple salad. Pretty simple. Again, I have the recipe in the description box below, but again, I've also made some changes to it. First, you wash the apples, and again, you don't have to peel them. You just cut them into bite-sized chunks. Then wash and chop a couple of stalks of celery. You add about 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, 1/2 cup of chopped celery, 1/2 cup of chopped pecans. This is how I chop pecans. Now the recipe calls for a 1/2 cup of raisins, but I don't have any raisins. But I do have Trader Joe's orange flavored dried cranberries, which I love, so I'm going to use those instead. I'm also adding some grapes to the recipe, which is not in the recipe at all, but I like grapes, so I'm adding them. Now the recipe calls for 1/3 to 1/2 cup of mayonnaise. A lot of people don't like mayonnaise, but I grew up in Kentucky. That was a staple in our household, but I never measure it out. I will start with a couple of tablespoons and just add it and mix it up from there until it's the way I want it. Here is that beautiful salad, and it tastes delicious, but if I'm being perfectly honest, it could have used a little salt. If you don't like mayo, you could probably substitute whipped cream instead. This time, I was a little smarter about storing it. I put it in individual containers, so when I'm ready to eat, I can just grab one from the fridge. And there you have it. That's how I used the apples that I picked in last week's video. This is probably the last time you will ever see me in the kitchen. Now, if you missed that video, you can check it out over here. And I have some really cool videos coming up. I explored the ruins of the old LA Zoo, which is, for me, a real live fright house. And then I also went to the new LA Zoo, which is really pretty amazing. So keep an eye out for those. Thank you for watching.